Social communication is a topic that is central to the autistic experience, and so is an important topic to talk about. But it's also a topic that I feel I don't understand fully in myself, so I'm concerned that I will not do it justice. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic older adult, and it's my goal to advocate for autistic adults by spreading positive information about autism and sharing a few of my own experiences along the way. How autistic people communicate and respond to other people is a primary factor in how autism is diagnosed. While many aspects of the autistic experience and even diagnosis may be different in all of us, and indeed while these different traits may be present in varying degrees in autistic people, social communication challenges must be present for someone to achieve a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So why was I concerned I might not do this topic justice? Well, on the surface, I would not consider my social communication challenges as my primary autistic experience. For starters, I don't have a lot of recent social experience in general to consider whether these experiences are abnormal. But herein lies the heart of the matter for me. The very fact I don't go out seeking social types of interactions is actually a core aspect of this very issue, and one that many autistic people might relate to. In fact, for many autistic people, leaving home is something that is only done when necessary. So moving on, what defines social communication differences in autistic people? According to the diagnostic criteria for autism from the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5th edition, social communication challenges are broken down into 3 areas as follows. Firstly, deficits in social emotional reciprocity. This refers to the normal back and forth flow of conversation whereby people usually take turns speaking and respond to subtle non-verbal cues in knowing when to speak or when to let the other person speak. This also includes reacting appropriately to emotional cues. For many autistic people, understanding or recognising these cues might be difficult. This difference might mean the autistic person finds small talk difficult or pointless and prefers conversations that go deeper. Maybe the autistic person is unsure when or how to shift conversation topics, or may dominate the conversation when topics of interest are raised, or steer conversations to those topics of interest while unaware of the listener's level of mutual interest or attention, and this may come across as monologuing. Other people may interpret our differences in these areas as bluntness, awkwardness, or lack of interest in other people. Because we may be aware we have these differences, but unaware when they happen, we may work hard to try to compensate using strategies such as copying other people's conversation patterns, or scripting conversations in our heads prior to having them. Or we may plan in detail how we might navigate each social gathering. All of these compensations take significant energy, often leaving us drained afterwards. At number 2, we have deficits in non-verbal communicative behaviours used for social interaction. Non-verbal communication involves things like eye contact, body language including hand gestures, and facial expressions at appropriate moments of conversation. Vocal gestures such as a laugh or a thoughtful or other vocalizations that infer attention, agreement, emotion or empathy, and tone and volume of voice. The main difference common to autistic people is not so much that we don't do these things, but often it may be that we are more analytical in how and when to make any of these gestures, rather than it being an automatic response, which is a more standard way of communicating. This analysis of the other person during each interaction and manually computing the appropriate response also requires significant effort. Likewise, for many autistic people, constantly trying to make the appropriate level of eye contact during these interactions takes significant mental resources. So at this point, while the stereotype is that autistic people don't make eye contact, it may be quite the opposite, as we may be trying so hard to find the appropriate level of eye contact that we swing too far and be accused of staring or make others uncomfortable by holding eye contact too long. But either way, this conscious awareness of and control of this one small aspect of communication can also take significant effort or mental and emotional resources. The outcome might be that we realise we have been trying so hard to moderate our eye contact that we have lost the run of the conversation, leaving us staring dumbly as we might realise we have missed the natural cue or question, and now the other person is looking at us, awaiting a reply, and we have no idea what they just said. The third area in the DSM is deficits in developing, maintaining and understanding relationships. This can include understanding social expectations around relationships. It is sometimes assumed that autistic people prefer to be alone, but this is generally not true. Many autistic people want relationships, but may struggle to make these connections due to differences in how we communicate. This may be because we might have difficulty understanding unspoken rules or subtext. In relationships, we may be unaware of subtle hints or other forms of indirect communication. This can be especially challenging for autistic adults who are undiagnosed, leading to frequent misunderstandings and even mutual frustration as we constantly miss things that others both take for granted and expect must surely be obvious. Well, these things might be obvious to them and other people, but often they are complete mysteries to us. These misunderstandings cause a lifetime of frustration and quite often trauma as we find ourselves fighting the same battles and missing opportunities, leading to the assumption that we are either broken or bad. In other examples, we might fail to understand when someone might be showing signs of attraction, with the result that we might miss opportunities to make romantic connections altogether. All these things can lead to depression, anxiety, or even self-harm as the cycle of miscommunication, missed opportunities, and self-blame continues without any understanding of the cause. Another factor in the diagnosis of autism is that these social communication challenges must have been present in childhood, with the further criteria that they are not better described by intellectual disability or global development delay. And as a further note, this is only Part A of the diagnostic criteria, with Part B looking at restricted repetitive behaviours, restricted interests, and sensory challenges. And while social communication challenges must be present to satisfy an autism diagnosis, these challenges will likely present differently in each autistic person. So, as we just mentioned, social communication challenges is just one part of the diagnostic criteria. Without going into the detail of Part B, it is important to note that repetitive behaviours, and in particular our sensory challenges, can also have a direct impact on how we might cope with any social occasion. For example, consider the following scenario. You've been invited to catch up with a group of old school friends at a bar or restaurant. When you arrive, you discover there is loud music playing and the venue is quite crowded. This means lots of voices trying to talk over the music and lots of visual stimulation. Maybe the lighting is either too dim or too bright, or there may be flashing lights over an adjacent dance floor. Added to this is the fact that there are lots of strong food smells. So now we are in an environment that is also extremely challenging for our autistic senses before we even try to interact socially. For many autistic people, this may mean that our nervous system shuts down, leaving us almost incapable of any interactions with these people, even though they may be people we want to see and connect with. This illustrates that although the sensory and repetitive behaviours aspect of the autism diagnosis fit within a separate section, in reality they interact with each other and cascade, causing complex autistic responses. And every social interaction will have some element of sensory impact. So again, returning to my experience, what challenges do I have with social communication, especially considering I don't feel this describes the strongest part of my autistic nature? It's actually quite interesting looking at what we have just described as the examples of autistic social communication difficulties, as I can look at that list and strongly identify with so many components of it, in spite of my previous statement that this is not my main autistic challenge. So some of my experiences are as follows. Before any interaction with other people, be that a social gathering or even approaching a shop counter to purchase a product, I script almost every conversation in my head before it happens. And the level of detail of this scripting can be really quite extensive. Sometimes I find myself scripting conversations that may never happen while lying in bed trying to go to sleep, or even while having a shower. Before going to any social event, I have to plan extensively. Things like, what food will be available? What might I need to take to supplement that? Who will be there? And script conversations accordingly, and other aspects like travel or parking, etc. When at a social gathering, I may need to stand apart and observe, or I may need the help of a family member or friend to navigate chatting with people I am less familiar with. Ironically, from the outside, it is unlikely that anyone would see my challenges in these settings as I compensate and mask extensively, and it may even appear I am comfortable interacting with anyone unfamiliar, but this only happens with enormous effort. When talking with people, I tend also to appear like I am reacting in an expected way, but internally I am constantly processing everything about the surroundings and interactions. I am constantly aware of my level of eye contact, controlling it like the director of a movie with constant thoughts of, look at their nose, now look away, glance at their eyes, not too long, look away again. This means I may miss what is being said. Before I was fully aware I was doing this self-direction, I was likely to just look over the person's shoulder as they spoke, often leading them to comment that I was distracted. This meant that I tried too hard and was told I was staring. Other differences in communication for me include things like info dumping on topics of interest, either with people in general or just at home with Trish. Sometimes in conversation, I might also pause and go blank for a few seconds as my brain processes what is being said or anything else from the environment I am currently in. This is due to processing delay, which is also quite common in autistic people. Another thing I have found myself doing more so in group conversations in the past is maybe saying something inappropriate inadvertently, as I may try too hard to fit in when at the edge of my comfort range. This might include making an inappropriate joke by trying to copy what I think other people might do, leading to very awkward moments as the group reacts negatively to what I might have just said. Moving on to relationships, this area has been a huge challenge for me. Although not so much with friendships, as I've had many close friends who maintain the contact with me, even though I rarely, if ever, called them. Where I've had significant struggles, though, through my life has been in trying to negotiate romantic relationships. And maybe there is another podcast to be created just on this topic. But a few examples here would include things like having no understanding when someone might have been interested in me romantically, or missing hints, or not understanding flirts, etc. The irony here is that I was very good at spotting those things in the interactions of other people, just not interactions involving me. Also missing communication cues within relationships leading to tension or even relationship breakdown. Or being too intense as a way of trying to compensate for my lack of responsiveness at other times, and maybe even coming across a bit like a stalker in this mode. And that never ends well. Okay, awkward. So moving on. Going into any new situation has always been an enormous challenge for me, with the stress and anxiety of how to enter those spaces with new people. A specific example here would be starting a new job. This is a huge one for me and has stopped me from progressing in a career sense on many occasions. Even taking on new clients in my audio production business is a huge obstacle. Other examples here include things like backing out of obligations at the last minute because of social anxiety. This has also meant not turning up to friends' weddings, birthdays, or other special events, which was always embarrassing. When talking with people, I can find it difficult not to know when and how to leave a conversation. This can also extend to not knowing when to leave a social event, sometimes being one of the last to leave, despite my overwhelm or anxiety about attending in the first place. Likewise, introductions to new people can be awkward or difficult, as I find myself focusing hard on a person's face when being introduced, as I also have a degree of face blindness, which makes it very difficult to remember new faces. This may mean I focus so hard on their face that I don't hear their name. This also plays out in difficulty using people's names in conversations. I know this is also a common one for many autistic people, where using someone's name can feel as awkward as making direct eye contact, as it feels way too personal. Similar to this is after having been introduced to someone and I do use their name, I then say the wrong name and instantly know I've said the wrong name without understanding why. Does this happen to anyone else? At friends' events like big birthdays or weddings, I often find I like to provide and operate sound equipment, as it means I can focus on working as a distraction from the social side of the gathering. After competing in a national sailing championship and finishing runner-up in my division, I did not attend the presentation dinner to receive my trophy for that achievement, as I was too overwhelmed by the prospect of having to socialise for an evening, particularly around food. And subsequently, I never did receive that trophy. In fact, I did like sailing as a sport, as I was able to compete with minimal interactions with other people. But in the end, I left competitive sailing because of the expectations that came with being a member of a club. So as we can see, despite not thinking I have severe social challenges, the stories above would suggest otherwise. So it is interesting that despite my outward appearance of not being too socially awkward, my internal experience is actually quite different. And in spite of all these challenges, I do enjoy social interactions as long as it is predictable, with people I want to be with, and I'm able to escape when necessary, is in an environment that is not too overstimulating, and I have time to plan and script prior to the event. And there is either food available that I can eat, or there is no judgment if I don't eat, or eat something safe that I've brought with me. Much of what we have touched upon here indicates that as autistic people, we have a strong tendency to compensate for our differences in many different ways and situations. The term often used for these compensatory strategies is masking. Masking can be done both consciously and unconsciously. We might consciously mask by suppressing our autistic traits, such as stimming, when in the presence of other people in an effort to fit in. But we might also mask unconsciously, as a lifetime of learning how to mimic other people's gestures, conversation styles, facial expressions, jokes and interests shows us that if we do this, we stand out less. For so many autistic adults diagnosed later in life, we are often completely unaware of the masking we had been doing right throughout our lives, as it had become an automatic coping strategy. But the cost of masking is that it takes significant energy to maintain a mask. So for autistic people, particularly undiagnosed autistic people, this can lead to constant fatigue or even burnout. As we have highlighted in previous podcasts, many autistic people also experience ADHD. And as with many aspects of our autistic experience, the combination of ADHD gives this topic an extra layer of complexity and nuance. Our ADHD may make us motivated to seek social interactions beyond what our autism might be comfortable with. While our autism may mean we miss social cues and context, our ADHD can also mean we might lack impulse control, causing us to barge into conversations or interject at inappropriate moments or with inappropriate or irrelevant details. We may also be inclined to finish other people's sentences or change topics or get distracted easily. A lifetime of negative responses to these ADHD traits can also lead to a reluctance to engage in social activities due to perceived shame around past interactions gone wrong. Another aspect to our autistic communication that is worth mentioning here is our tendency for literal thinking and interpretations. This can mean that we may have trouble understanding things like sarcasm, metaphors, idioms, and some jokes. But to be clear, this does not mean that all autistic people do not understand these things. But more likely we may take more time processing to decode the deeper meaning. For example, for me, when hearing sarcasm, for instance, I know it's sarcasm generally. So my brain first flags the incoming information as sarcasm. It then digests the actual words and assigns the literal interpretation. Once that has been processed and it has been confirmed that the literal interpretation is nonsense, it then starts to look for an alternative meaning based on the previous experiences of sarcasm until it settles on the most likely meaning. And all this takes maybe more time and effort than it might for a neurotypical person. In fact, any information coming in my brain will always be assigned a literal interpretation before moving on to try to decode any other meaning. I will usually get to the correct answer, but maybe not always. And likewise, this does not mean that autistic people don't use sarcasm. Some autistic people have a razor-sharp wit and are very well adept at this form of communication. A key point that we have touched on a few times in this podcast is the energy any socialising takes for an autistic person. This is sometimes referred to as our social battery. Communication and socialising depletes energy from our social battery, and the rate of depletion will vary with each situation, event, or other factors like sensory triggers. The battery is recharged with alone time or time focused on our special interests. When this social battery is getting empty, we may find any of several key things happening. We might start to lose the ability to communicate, or even speak, or maybe find it takes longer to process what is being said to us. We might find our sensory overwhelm increases beyond its usual level. We may feel a strong need to escape, and if we can't escape, possibly experience a rising sense of panic. This concept of a battery also makes it clear that if our battery is already depleted before going to the social event, then we will be pushing ourselves past our limits. In this analogy, after a social outing, our battery may also be depleted, which might also look like fatigue or the need for solitude. So before we finish here, there are a few common questions that come up about autistic social communication challenges. And they are: 1. Doesn't everyone struggle in one way or other with socialising? And 2. Does this mean that autistic people are just introverts? Okay, let's look at these individually. Firstly, doesn't everyone struggle with social interactions? Well, apart from the obvious generalisation here, yes, many people do struggle with social interactions. So let's look at the difference. If you are an allistic, or in other words, non-autistic person listening to this, and you are now thinking about how you might struggle with social situations yourself, the very first thing I want to say is that your individual struggles in this area are real and in no way in question at this point. The difference between autistic and non-autistic people in this one single area, however, is the impact those struggles have on all aspects of life. So if you take the very real struggles that a non-autistic person might face with socialising and communication, without devaluing those struggles, they are a normal part of life's challenges. For the autistic person, on the other hand, by definition, those challenges have clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. So yes, if you're non-autistic, it's like taking your worst social moments and embarrassments, and maybe that is closer to the daily experience of the autistic person, for example. And likewise for the question, does this mean that autistic people are just introverts? Okay, so introverts may have a higher degree of social discomfort to the average person, and maybe that discomfort approaches what an autistic person might experience. But the autistic experience also adds several other significant disabling layers on top of that discomfort, such as sensory overwhelm and rigid routines and thinking patterns. In effect, this social discomfort is just one small part of the overall autistic experience. So introversion and autism are not the same. You can be autistic and introverted, but you might also be autistic and extroverted, especially if you also have ADHD. And so often, autistic ADHD people may be both introverted and extroverted at the same time. Okay, so that's probably enough for one podcast. Social communication is obviously an important topic in the context of autism. So in spite of my reluctance at the outset, I hope we have talked about some useful concepts. And as always, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. And as an aside, I've become aware that I've not been receiving all the comments posted. So if you have posted a comment on recent videos and I have not responded either with a message or a thumbs up or a heart, please send me an email, as it's my aim to respond in some way to every comment posted. If I'm not getting your comments, I want to know so I can fix the problem. So until next time, thanks for watching. Bye for now.